first time in 2024, as we're about 3.5 weeks away to the start of the college baseball season. Our friend from D1Baseball.com, Kendall Rogers. Hello, Kendall.
How's it going, guys? I'll tell you what, my prediction is things will at least be better for Ole Miss and Mississippi State in 2024.
All right. Good talk to you. We'll catch you here in a couple of weeks. Thanks, man. Oh, goodness. I got to be honest, it was a little shocking to see the preseason top 25 come out and not only not see Ole Miss or Mississippi State, but also no Southern Miss. And given the success that these three programs have had over the last decade and a half, couple of decades, whatever measure you want to use, it's a little jarring to not see any of the three teams in the top 25 going into the year.
Yeah, Southern Miss was a club that I thought was really close. I think there's a lot of pieces of that team that we really like. I think ultimately when you look at Ole Miss and Mississippi State, it's not that we don't believe in them. It's that they kind of have to show it. And I think if you look at both of those teams, I think Ole Miss did a really nice job in the transfer portal, during the offseason. They might not have gotten the Braden Montgomerys or the Luke Holmans, but they did a really nice job accumulating players out of the portal. I like a lot of their pieces. I think Mississippi State, for me, Richard, I think is going to knock the cover off the ball. The question for me is, can the pitching staff take a big step forward? And if they can, under new pitching coach Justin Parker, I have no doubt that he can be better. Here's a problem that both teams could have, and that's that both teams could be infinitely better. And in terms of their standing in the conference, it might not mean a whole lot, just because I think the SEC is going to be really, really good.
Yeah, but is that a what else is new thing, or do you think it's a different level of good than we've seen in recent seasons?
I think it's a different level because, I think if you look at this league overall, like who's the bad team in the SEC right now? Kentucky under Nate Mingione has kind of found its stride. They're going to be good again. They've got Devin Burks and some really nice older pieces back. Georgia, on paper they could struggle, but again, Wes Johnson did a really nice job in the portal. Missouri with Carrick Jackson, Carrick is one of those guys who's a really hard-nosed coach. They're going to probably play over their skis a little bit. So, the problem you run into in this league is, like, at this point, who is bad? And frankly, there were times last year when Ole Miss and Mississippi State were not bad. It's just they had a lot, the State in particular had a lot of really bad luck. And so I just think this league as a whole is better than it ever has been. I feel like we say that every year, but it once again is the case this year. And crazy enough, we get Oklahoma and Texas in a year. So it's not going to get any easier.
No, it certainly is not. Are we trending? Could we get to a point, and you've seen it happen in softball, I guess 13 softball playing programs in the SEC, and I think that's the only sport where it's happened, where every single team in the conference makes the postseason? Is there a possibility that could happen?
I think there's a possibility. I don't know if it will happen because I do think baseball as a sport is I don't say it's a little. I think it's a lot deeper than softball in terms of the number of teams that are postseason caliber. So I don't know if that'll happen because you do have leagues like the Sun Belt, like the Big 12, who with realignment I think have continued to get better and better. But there's no doubt. Will there be a time when all of them are deserving of being in? Absolutely. I think you can look at the SEC this year and go, you know what, I could conceivably see every single one of those teams getting in because, again, if you look at the SEC West on paper in baseball this year, there is not a team on that list that I look at and go, you know what, I don't think they're postseason caliber when it comes to a talent standpoint. They're all postseason caliber, and they all can make a run to Omaha.
New head coach in Hattiesburg. Christian Ostrander takes over that job. Great reputation, has done a phenomenal job with the pitching staff over the last several years. That is a program, Kendall, that continuity should be the biggest descriptive word you use. He's only the fifth head coach in the history of the program. The four previous head coaches have all had success. They've all been there for a really, really long time. Tell me what you think about this Southern Miss team going into 2024.
Well, I think the biggest thing with Southern Miss is, I always feel pretty good about Southern Miss now from a pitching standpoint with Oz leading the way. It's kind of funny I say that because I remember back in the day where, you looked at Southern Miss, you're like, boy, they can really mash, but I just don't know if they have enough on the mound. I think they'll be fine on the mound. I think they'll be pretty solid offensively, and so I think the biggest thing is just how does he make the transition to being a head coach? I think he was obviously a no-brainer hire, but I think he's a very, very good coach, and I don't think Southern Miss is going to skip a beat. When Corky handed the program over to Scott, they didn't really skip a beat. If anything, you could argue they got a little bit better some of those years. And, I think he turned that program over to Oz, and I think it's just wash, rinse, repeat. I think they're going to continue being a really good program. And I do think the Sun Belt being as good of a league is really going to help them. It's going to be a highly competitive league each season. And I think the world of that program. I think what they've done, on the field, what they've done with their fan base, it's an ultra attractive program. So it's no surprise to me that they've continued to accumulate enough talent to be, in that regional/super regional discussion every single year.
Kendall, I think you had Ole Miss ranked with the, if I remember correctly, the number 7 transfer portal class. Can the Rebels make a bounce back from where they were a couple of seasons ago? I know 2 years ago it was carrying a trophy off the field in Omaha, but be a postseason team based on the guys that they have coming in, knowing that Hunter Elliott on the mound this year it's just unlikely.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the biggest thing, kind of just starting with guys that are actually back, I think the biggest key is guys like Saunier and Rivas to really take a big step forward. And I think, from a transfer standpoint, I really like what they brought in. I mean, Jackson Ross, Nolan Shanuel got a lot of the fanfare last year at Florida Atlantic. But, I mean, if you go back and look at what Jackson Ross did offensively, FAU last year with John McCormick does a great job with his offenses down there. Jackson Ross had an incredible year. So, how does he make the transition to the SEC? That's a question mark, but he's an ultra talented player. I had him much higher on kind of my prospect list, and a lot of people probably did. I think he's a sensational player. Andrew Fisher, certainly a really sought-after player in the portal during the offseason. They were able to get him. He's obviously very talented. And then Tracy Hughes, is a kid, out of Mercer, who, has big-time power, really athletic guy. And, again, how does he make that transition to the SEC? And then you throw, some of those other guys in there. And I think that trio right there for me, if they click and if they make that quick transition, which is what Ole Miss is kind of counting on and expecting, I think that could be a really, really good offensive lineup. And, again, and if the offensive lineup is really good, then guess what? That takes a little bit of pressure off the Sauniers, the Rivases, the JT Quinns, and guys like that.
I don't mean to put pressure on an individual kid. I know him. He's a great kid. But you think about the history of catcher at Ole Miss with Mike Bianco and Carl Lafferty on that staff. They've had guys that are very, very good defensively and a bunch of guys that can hit. Campbell Smithwick, who is the true freshman out of Oxford High School, decided not to go the draft route, wanted to go to college. What can be reasonably expected from a true freshman playing that position in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for him is, he showed a pretty consistent offensive approach in the fall. He's, from what I understand, he's not like a sensational defender, but he's a pretty solid defender. So I think if you're Ole Miss and if he can give you solid defense, let's say he can hit 270 for you, give you some power production, I think out of a freshman catcher back in the SEC, I think you'll absolutely take that. So I think the biggest thing for Ole Miss is you're right. You don't want to ever throw a lot of pressure on a young guy like that. But, I think if he can do that offensively and then play pretty solid defense, I think he'll take it, because I don't think Ole Miss is going to be an offense that you look at and go, hey, Campbell Smithwick has to hit 320 for this offense to be good. I don't think he's going to have to get anywhere near that for the offense to be ultra productive.
All right, last thing, let's go back to Mississippi State for a second. Yeah, you talked about an offensive explosion that you think is coming. Who leads the way in your mind for that? Is it I'll ask you. Who is leading that offense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just think when you look at that offense as a whole, I mean, obviously you look at, Hunter Hines, just a big-time power guy. I mean, you look at, guys from last year that I actually thought, at times looked pretty good. You look at Amani O'Leary, David Mershon, Dakota Jordan, obviously. We talk about the portal losses or the portal misses that Mississippi State had. I mean, look at Dakota Jordan last year. I mean, if he stays in the portal and goes out and let's say goes to Georgia, is what was rumored. That would have been a big hit for them. So keeping him was huge. He's obviously an ultra talented player. We saw, we saw kind of elements of what he can kind of bring to the table last year. I think those guys will be solid offensively. I think for me, when you look at the pitching staff, I was just talking to somebody close to the program yesterday, and it sounds like Nate Dome has really stood out here early on, in individuals. It sounds like he's a guy that, has kind of been sitting 94, 97, throwing multiple pitches for strikes. If he can stay healthy, Colby Holcomb, Richard, he was a guy that, last year I would watch Colby Holcomb for 4 innings and go, wait, how in the world are his numbers, what they are right now? Because the stuff is explosive.